Armed forces continue to chase the remaining mercenaries, purging a homeland from their crimes. The citizens of Antioch carried out a march of solidarity with Syria under the motto "No to imperialist intervention in Syria." Iran renews its support for peaceful political solutions of the crisis in Syria. And the Russian authorities foil a terrorist attack in northern Caucasia. Good afternoon, welcome to our news bulletin. I'm Dania Nizam. A terrorist blast took place this afternoon in Abu Ramani neighborhood in Damascus. The blast occurred when two explosive devices were detonated in Al-Mahdi Street near the Guard Battalion, injuring 4 people. In Aleppo, our valiant armed forces continued to chase the remaining terrorists, killing many of them. They clashed with them near the mosque of Jamal al-Kallasan, killing and wounding several terrorists. The security forces carried out a qualitative operation near Al-Hal market and clashed with terrorists in Bab and Chak in Old Aleppo, killing several terrorists. They also killed Nabhan, leader of a terrorist group in Al-Marji in Aleppo. Another terrorist group led by Abdullah Hussein al-Takkal, also known as Captain, massacred a family of 5 members in Al-Marji, including 2 brothers and 3 minor children. A unit of our valiant armed forces chased the remaining armed terrorists in the farms of Zamalka and Hazza in the Damascus countryside and killed a large number of them. The army also confiscated a considerable amount of weapons, ammunition, explosive devices, space telecommunication equipment, and stolen quantities of medicine. The armed forces repelled armed terrorist groups that attacked citizens in Harem city and Idlib countryside. An official source said that the armed forces killed a number of terrorists and are pursuing others while the rest fled inside the Turkish territories. The source added that Omar Zaitar, Mohammed al-Doush, Abdullah Jamali, Muhannad Saifuddin and Mohammed Ghalib Hamadi were among the killed terrorists. Security forces also arrested a terrorist who was transferring batteries used for explosive devices to the armed terrorist groups in the town of Saraqib in the countryside of the city. Meanwhile, an explosive device exploded in March 8th city in the city of Jisr al-Shughur in Idlib, blowing up the terrorist Hadi Subhi al-Jiblawi while he was planting the device. A unit of our valiant armed forces clashed today with a terrorist group that was attacking citizens in the northern area of the Hamasak countryside. They killed all members of this group and confiscated their arms. Among the dead terrorists, there were a number of wanted men, including Abdul Karim al-Dghim from the Idlib countryside, Hammam Abdul Hadi Muhammad, Hassan Ali al-Khlif, and Abdul Qadir Ali al-Khlif. In Homs, a unit of our armed forces confronted an armed group that tried to attack citizens and security forces in Bab Houd, inflicting heavy casualties. Dozens of terrorists were killed after the great losses that they sustained and after their morale had collapsed. A unit of our armed forces foiled an attempt to smuggle a terrorist group from Lebanon into Syria in the Tel Kalach countryside. Dozens of terrorists tried to infiltrate to Syria near the village of Uzair from the Jalouk Valley in Lebanon. The armed forces confronted them and forced them to run away into Lebanon. The British paper The Independent today published a column by Mr. Robert Fisk under the title "Syria's Way from Jihad to Jail." Mr. Fisk spoke about his visit to a Syrian jail where he met some prisoners who told him that they supported the armed groups. They included a French person from Algerian origins with a long beard and a Turkish citizen who spoke about being trained in a camp that belonged to Taliban along the Pakistani-Afghan borders. A Syrian prisoner spoke about helping suicide bombers to detonate a deadly charge in central Damascus. Mr. Fisk was the only Western journalist allowed to visit prisoners in Syria. His visit lasted for more than 4 hours. The Lebanese custom officials foiled an attempt to smuggle 12 advanced communication equipment at the hands of a foreign pilot in a private Qatari plane. The Lebanese intelligence forces also detained the retired military intelligence major Wissam Abdel Khaliq and charged him of buying weapons to smuggle them into Syria. According to Al-Manar TV station, he was carrying $50,000 and accompanied his cousin and brother-in-law, who works in the British paper The Times. He intended to buy various weapons from the refugee camp of Burj al-Barajne in order to smuggle them into Syria. He admitted the charges and showed a list of the kinds of weapons he wanted to buy. They included B-10 missiles with a high destructive power. His journalist brother-in-law was trying to write an investigative report about armed men moving between Syria and Lebanon. Wahhabism in Syria today is trying to achieve what America has failed to achieve through the powers of arms. While initiatives are being presented, Saudi Arabia and Qatar are exerting strong efforts to import fighters from Al-Qaeda in Yemen in order to smuggle them into Syria.
The new American wars have a new form. When America's military project to occupy this region failed, America reformulated its alliance with Wahhabism, trying to utilize its agents and tools under various mottos, like the Cedar Revolt, Creative Chaos, Jasmine Revolt, the Arab Spring, and Freedom Fighters. The last motto was the name which former President Reagan gave to Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan in the mid-1980s. This name is being used again today. The new plot includes moving Al-Qaeda terrorists from Yemen to Turkey in order to smuggle them into Syria, giving each of their families $10,000. This was admitted by Tariq al-Fadli and published by the Yemeni paper Adan al-Ghad. In Libya, the leader of the NATO mercenaries in Tripoli, Abdel Hakim Belhaj, entered the central bank of Libya and got $80 million to send them to Al-Qaeda in Syria. This seems to be an implementation of the order given by Ayman al-Zawahiri to establish a fixed organizational structure of Al-Qaeda in Lebanon, just as America had done in Pakistan when it gave the name of Freedom Fighters to the agents of Taliban. Political Wahhabism has brought Mohammed Morsi to power in Egypt. It is also working to achieve what America has failed to achieve through the force of arms in Iraq, Lebanon, occupied Palestine, and Syria today.
336 detainees involved in recent events were released because there was no blood on their hands in the governorates of Damascus, its countryside, Aleppo, Homs, Hama, and Daraa. They pledged not to be involved in acts of terrorism and asserted that they would stand by the efforts exerted for the reconstruction and consolidation of the power of their homeland and to resume their normal lives. 50 detainees were released in Aleppo after pledging to stand by their homeland after they realized Syria was targeted by a large conspiracy. In Hama, 19 citizens were released after they had pledged to contribute actively to the construction efforts in their homeland in Daraa. 19 detainees were released because their hands were clean after they pledged not to be involved in any acts harming the security of their homeland and their fellow citizens. The citizens of Antioch carried out a march of solidarity with Syria under the motto "No to Imperialist Intervention in Syria." They rejected the Turkish policies against Syria and asserted that the brotherly people of Turkey support Syria's people and government against terrorism and Western and American plots. The Turkish demonstrators also announced their rejection of the flagrant intervention in Syria's internal affairs. They called upon the Turkish government to desist from supporting the terrorist gangs which are financed by Wahhabism under the pretext of freedom and democracy. The demonstrators greeted Syria, its people, and its leadership. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Gennady Gatilov held the parties who are supplying the Syrian opposition with weapons responsible for the threats the opposition is making about targeting civil air navigation. Gatilov added that the threats made by the Syrian opposition about targeting the civil air navigation are resulting from some parties who are irresponsibly supplying the opposition with weapons. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister for Arab and African Affairs, Hussein Amir Abdullahian, asserted his country's support for political and peaceful solutions to the crisis in Syria, pointing out that the important measure in this field during the non-aligned summit in Tehran was the formation of a group to resolve the crisis in Syria. He indicated that Iran is seeking to maintain security and stability in Syria. Russian authorities foiled last night an attempt for a large terrorist attack in the area of Kabardino-Balkari in North Caucasus. The regional interior ministry was quoted by the Russian Novosti news agency as saying that police killed a man after he opened fire on a checkpoint when policemen tried to search his car, where they found a time bomb made of various chemicals and connected to a timer. The Interior Ministry added that 15 kilograms of TNT explosives were found in the car. The bomb was defused immediately, as police also found a machine gun and a pistol in the car. Several terrorist attacks took place in the past few years in Chechnya, Dagestan and Indonesia. And now it's over to Vani with our economic news. For more information, you can visit our website, syriaonline.sy. Thank you, and God bless you all. Good afternoon, welcome to our news bulletin. I'm Dania Nizam. A terrorist blast took place this afternoon in Abu Ramani neighborhood in Damascus, Syria. And the Russian authorities foil a terrorist attack in northern Caucasus. The blast occurred when two explosive devices were detonated in Al-Mahdi Street near the Guard Battalion, injuring 4 people. In Aleppo, our valiant armed forces continued to chase the remaining terrorists, killing many of them. They clashed with them near the mosque. The citizens of Antioch carried out a march of solidarity with Syria under the motto "No to imperialist intervention in Syria." Iran renews its support for peaceful political solutions of the crisis in Syria. Our armed forces continue to chase the remaining mercenaries, purging our homeland from their crimes.